obviously we seem to have a real serious problem about reconciliation. These two quotations were taken. Uh, this is a quotation by the JHU at a press conference recently with regard to the LLRC commission, the LLRC report. The commission had exceeded the mandate which was given to them and has said that there is an ethnic problem in the country, while going on to say there is a need for the devolution of power. These are political problems, and we have told them that there is no such dispute, but the commission had not recognized the limits of equality. Right? So this is what the JHU had to say. Now, I also found it interesting what the TNA had to say about the LLRC. The LLRC does not address important questions of accountability. It was designed to shield civilian and military leaders responsible for serious crimes from blame, and evinces the Sri Lankan state's unwillingness to acknowledge and address issues of accountability. Now, it seems like the LLRC is rather caught between a rock and a hard place. Right? Because on the one hand, the JHU is saying that it has overstepped its mandate. On the other hand, the TNA is saying it hasn't gone far enough. I'm really going to talk about, when I talk about reconciliation, I'm going to really talk about an approach that should or has been taken to reconfigure and rebuild a country after the war. I realize that there are lots of questions about the politics of that, and I'm going to get into that later on in the paper. So, before I go any further though, I do want to make this point. There appears to be, to me, a real problem with our discourse, in that it has become extremely dualistic. You are either, it's almost a Bushian doctrine of being either with us or against us. So if you, if you espouse a particular view that is supportive of the government, that automatically makes you opposed to someone else. And if you support a particular view of someone else, it automatically makes you opposed to the government. And in a way, it's rather dualistic. So the kind of thinking that I want to bring here, and especially for me, as someone who's both a Burgher and a Tamil and rather identity confused all the time, is how do I place myself in this kind of duality of this discourse? And it's kind of like having to pick sides, and what do you do when you can't pick sides? So I just want to make a point in methodology, and this is kind of my theoretical framework, and I think it's important. I'm really drawing on the work of Gloria Anzaldúa, who's a Chicano Mexican-American lady, who's written a lot about a third kind of consciousness. She calls it new consciousness. So this quotation is from one of her most well-known works called Borderlands. Cradled in one culture, sandwiched between two cultures, straddling all three cultures and their value systems, La Mestiza undergoes a struggle of the flesh, a struggle of borders and inner war. Like all people, we perceive the vision of reality that our culture communicates. Like others, having or living in more than one culture, we get multiple, often opposing messages. The coming together of two self-consistent, but habitually incompatible frames of references cause, I'm not sure really how to pronounce that, a cultural collision. And I think I want to keep this in mind and kind of use this kind of framework that Anzaldúa is kind of bringing forward of having a different kind of, how do you articulate your consciousness if you are from kind of hybrid background in exploring the issues that I'm bringing up in my paper. So the way I've really gone about this paper is to, I come from a very qualitative background. I know Bilal had questions about me. Can you bring, English literature methodology into understanding of social science issues? So I think you can, Bilal. So to answer your question in the course of my presentation, I'm going to bring in a very qualitative background, and I'm really going to do a close reading of 3 texts, right? And I'm reading these texts as utterances, as kind of an analyses of how people are thinking. It's a discourse analysis that I'm doing, okay? And I'm heavily influenced by the work of Qadri Ismail, who published a very interesting paper in Subaltern Studies series, where he argued where he read 3 texts of Tamil nationalism, and he argued that the nation can be read situationally and dynamically. So I'm going to draw on that work. And so the text that I'm going to pick, and we can, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions as why did I pick these texts, and but the 3 texts that I'm really going to look at for this paper is, sorry for this presentation, is the President's speech to Parliament on the 19th of May, announcing the end of the war to Parliament. Mahinda Chintanaya 2010, which was the President's election manifesto, and of course we know how that, nearly 60% of the country voted for him, so that must mean that there is widespread support for at least some of the things that he wants to do, among some of the people at least, or well, the majority of the people at least. And I'm going to compare that with the response to the LLRC by the TNA. Now, I don't have time because it's very limited and I'm trying to stick to time. Tarindhi has told me about time. So I'm trying to, I don't want to get into the question of, should I pick the LLRC report? Is it a government report? Is it not? So I'm not going to get into that. But we can have a discussion about why did I pick these texts later on. The research problem and the real puzzle for me, because this is part of a larger project that I want to do, is as to why does the political leadership of a country that has experienced tensions between ethnic communities for more than 60 years and has known nearly 30 years of armed conflict continue to find it difficult to effectively reconcile our polarized political communities. And this is part of a larger research question that I'm asking, not just in terms of this paper, but in terms of lots of other projects that I want to look at. 5 minutes, wow. So I'm really going to go through very quickly without getting into much detail as to how is reconciliation understood by the President on the one hand and the TNA on the other. So if you look at the three urgent issues that require attention, truth, accountability or justice, and reparation as being very urgent priorities for reconciliation. On the other hand, if you look at the government's the President's discourse on reconciliation, there's a huge emphasis on economic development, massive emphasis on economic development, including infrastructure, resettlement of people who have been displaced, including Muslim IDPs, rehabilitation of ex-cadres, and I've said political solution, but the language that is used is a political solution which requires a national consensus. Of course, we can argue as to how we understand a national consensus, but it's a very interesting. So that's what the President's view seems to be saying, right? No, forward. Yeah. So to just basically give you some points from the President's view of reconciliation. These documents try to establish a sense of collective victimhood. In his speech to Parliament, he talks about our people and tries to bring out the fact that we are all one, people. And I like the use of the word our. It has two very interesting connotations. You mean our as in together, but our also a sense of ownership. I think that sense that use of the word our is very interesting there. So he tries to establish the fact that we are all victims of this disastrous terrorist group called the LTT. But he also attempts to de-link the LTT and the Tamils, to say that there are a difference between issues of the Tamils and the issues of the LTTE. And therefore establishes a special victimhood for the Tamil population, who have been specially victimized by these big bad terrorists. So, as I said before, in order to resolve these issues that the Tamil people have, we're not going to get into the issues of the LTT because they've been decimated. We need to focus on resettlement, economic development, rehabilitation of ex-cadres, and democracy, especially the right to vote, but understood in a particular way. And now let me come to the TNA view of reconciliation, which I found this really interesting, that the TNA claims that it is the largest political party representing Tamils in the northern east of Sri Lanka, and they are the elected representatives of the worst affected victims of the war, right? And the basis for their critique of the LLRC are based on the needs and expectations of victims as communicated to the TNA and on relevant international standards. However, despite the way that has been phrased there, it appears that relevant international standards appear to be be given far more weight in the final report, in the final response, than I really don't know how. I'll come to that about how the views of people who have been affected by the war. So, if you look at the TNA response, it is almost exclusively dependent on international humanitarian law and international human rights law. And this again raises questions as to who the audience for this report is. And also a question for me is there a blind spot and an assumption that the needs of the people who have been affected by the war are the same and are exactly the same, they fit seamlessly with international human rights law and international humanitarian law paradigms. And I think we need to ask ourselves these questions, because I don't think it's as simple as saying these things agree. Yeah. So the conclusions that I have tentatively drawn from looking at this, and I'm sorry I don't have the time to get into these further, is that there are contesting and competing visions of reconciliation attempting to gain ascendance at the same time in Sri Lanka. This for me means that reconciliation is a political imperative. I think Nishan kind of would ask this question as to what does reconciliation mean? And I think it's very easy to assume that it has particular, it has a normative, we can say that there are normative kind of values to reconciliation, but I think realistically, reconciliation is extremely political. And it's important to look at the power dynamics that undergird reconciliation. So some of the questions that are emerging for me out of this research, if you don't mind hanging on a second, is then if there are differing visions of reconciliation, how then do we bring them together? How do we reconcile reconciliation in Sri Lanka? Should they be reconciled at all? And what are the politics of these decisions? Thank you very much.